D-Day and then Operation Market Guard. And that's when they really started using the Pathfinders. And at that point, it was just a beacon on the ground for the aircraft. And they did supply some assembly aids, but it's really when you get into the Vietnam War, techniques that were developed here on Fort Benning, and how to actually use Pathfinders when it comes for, again, air mobile insertions, which was a very big thing.
Welcome back to Leaders Recon. Today we're talking about Pathfinder with Sergeant First Class Ludecke and Staff Sergeant Morales, instructors here at the Warrior Training Center. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, thank you for having us.
So before we dive into Pathfinder and can you tell us a little bit about what is a Pathfinder?
Sir, well, Pathfinder is a subject matter expert on all things airdrop resupply. Dig into the weeds and kind of expound on anything else that another school may teach you about airdrop resupply, and we just combine it all into one package in a 16-day course to make that individual, like I said, an expert in sling load, external load, air movement for resupply, setting up helicopter landing zones to deliver personnel or equipment, and then finally setting up drop zones of various types to, again, deliver human resupply or equipment.
Has there ever been a time where either one of you have been able to execute some of these skills in a mission environment?
Good.
Yeah, I actually had an opportunity while I was in Afghanistan, much like a lot of other people. The easiest way to get around in a lot of cases is via air mobile insertion. So while I was there in Afghanistan and in Iraq as well, had an opportunity to use the skills that I learned at Pathfinder School in a real world situation.
So, and I'm assuming for the airborne units and stuff, I guess it's a requirement to have Pathfinders then as part of the units, or?
Yes, sir. It depends on what type of drops they're doing. So a computed air release point, that can just be a jump master qualified individual. They just go to the point of impact, mark it, and go from there. Where it gets more difficult, where it has to be a Pathfinder, where the Army drop zones, the verbally initiated release system, and the ground marked release system, that is required by doctrine to be a Pathfinder.
And I guess so before I ask you what all those things are, because for those that are listening in, can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, the history of where did Pathfinders come from? Where are we today?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so really dating back to World War II, when the Army realized there was a need for a mass airborne assault. And so particular to Operation Husky, which is an invasion of Sicily, during the airborne assault, they realized, okay, we've got people scattered all over the place, and it's not an organized means to deliver the people, the paratroopers, to the ground. So when you have D-Day and then Operation Market Guard, that's when they really started using the Pathfinders. And at that point, it was just a beacon on the ground for the aircraft. And they did supply some assembly aids, but it's really when you get into the Vietnam War, techniques that were developed here on Fort Benning, and how to actually use Pathfinders when it comes for, again, air mobile insertions, which was a very big thing during Vietnam. And then moving forward to the global war on terrorism, and even where we are now with the fight, the need for Pathfinders has really grown, because again, a precision way to get soldiers to and from the battlefield, rather a precise way to get soldiers to and from the battlefield, is using helicopters. And of course, again, when you think about airborne insertions and airborne assaults, having your Pathfinders on the ground there to provide navigational aid, and then as well as assembly aids as well. That's and so that's where the history started, and then that's where we're going into the future.
So Pathfinder's taught here at WTC. You both are instructors. What's the role that WTC plays in Pathfinder now?
Yes, sir. So since the first of the 507th has gone away as the proponency, we have absorbed the executive agency of Pathfinder. There's also the Sabolowski Pathfinder School as well. What we're trying to do, we didn't have a seat at the table when there's the discussions about Pathfinder going away. Some of the things that were cited was funding. They were over strength on the force, meaning people with Pathfinder badges, and then you could get those skill sets at other schools. My rebuttal to that is, for funding, we're a 16-day course. We're more consolidated, as where the active component is a 3-week course. For getting that skill set at different schools, there's arguments that I'm sure everybody who's watching that has been in the Army and gone to schools can make, and the obvious reasons. Air assault can, somewhat give you a touch on helicopter landing zones. Well, we dive into that. Again, we're the subject matter experts. We go well more into detail in that. Our phase is longer. Sergeant Morales is the phase chief of HLZs. For sling loads, you have the sling load inspector course. Again, that's the 1 to 2 week course itself. And in 4 days, we take basic loads that the Army has in its inventory, apply the doctrinal application to it, and then our best practices, which has been learned and implemented downrange. So best practices. You can take those 4 loads, and then the idea is that Pathfinders can go sling any unique load, whether that's a downed aircraft, a downed vehicle, what have you, and they can apply that there. So it's the premier schoolhouse for sling loads and HLZs, all consolidated into just 2 phases instead of sending your soldiers to 2 separate schools. Now for drop zones, the argument was going through drop zones, passing Pathfinder will make you a current qualified drop zone support team leader.
Okay.
So the argument for that was the only unique thing that Pathfinder School had to offer, right? So the other side of that is, well, they got Jump Master. Well, if you are a graduate of Jump Master, like I spoke on earlier, you can go be the drop zone support team leader for a computed air release point drop.
Mm-hmm.
What that means in layman's terms is a airplane with its computers will calculate it. The Air Force Navigator will calculate the release point in the air so that the item will land where it's supposed to.
Okay.
Okay, so Jump Master is a great program. I liked it so much I went twice. But the main thing you get out of that is being able to do an inspection on a jumper to where they are safe and have a safe exit out of that aircraft. And then you do learn a little bit of actions on the aircraft and a little bit of the drop zone support team leader duties and responsibilities. But that's just for that you go set up on the point of impact. And generally, I'll give an example of Fort Benning here. Fryer Drop Zone has a giant mound, so it's pretty much just plug and play. You show up, you set up the appropriate markings, and you're good to go. Where Pathfinder dives into a little bit more is we fill in all the gaps on all the phases, drop zone specifically since we're talking about it. We go into the Army drop zone, so verbally initiated release system like I talked about, and ground mark release system. So verbally initiated release system, there's a ton of problem solving that goes into that. You're factoring in the wind, the forward throw of the aircraft, and then you're going to have to use complex formulas such as trigonometry, the law of sine and cosine, to potentially calculate an offset release or a delayed release. These are complex things that you're not going to learn in Jump Master School. So again, we consolidate this. The ground mark release system, that's the proponent of that is USASOC, so your SF units, right? When fortunately, and this is not a dig on them, the 18 series guys require a waiver to attend the school. And I think that's a huge disservice. It's something as executive agent we're looking to improve on the prerequisites for people to attend. What I'm told from guys in the community, in the Q course, some of the guys get a basic refresher or what have you on ground mark release system drop zones. But it seems that every time we go help these guys out, they have a very limited understanding of that, which is fine. We don't mind teaching that, and that's something I'm sure we'll touch on, that we are available to the force to help out with these things. So again, we specialize in that, and then we go into complex problem solving, such as a PI shift to mathematically figure this out, because with that drop zone specifically, you're not going to have communications always, so it handles it like that. Obviously, I speak drop zone heavy because I used to be a drop zone instructor before I took over for NCOIC. So I'll turn it over to Sergeant Morales, who again is our HLZ phase chief. He can speak on that.
Well, and I guess before you dig into the or the specific phases here a little bit, because there's a lot of information. So can you give us like an overview of like how is the course broken out? You said 16-day course. What does that look like?
Sure, and before I get to that, I want to say that the WTC, we're professional instructors. The old National Guard from 15, 20 years ago, when it was show up for your 1 week in a month, 2 weeks during the summer, and you have a barbecue, and that was really it. That's gone away. We've seen the need between the different components to work together. And so if you come here to the WTC, which was started by our current Deputy Commander, Mr. Sider, or we come to you, you're going to get a professional organization, and you come to us, you're going to get anything that's on par, the equivalent. Maybe in my opinion, you're going to get something better, because we are dedicated instructors to our craft, to our course, and we take a lot of pride in it. and we will spend whatever time is necessary because this is our sole focus. We volunteered to come here. We were vetted. We went through a hiring process before we got here. So we weren't just assigned here randomly by the Army where they just drew a name out of a hat and said, now you're going to be a Pathfinder school instructor. I interviewed with Sergeant Ludecke before I got here. He knew who I was before I got here. I knew who he was, what I was capable of, and I was brought here just like he was brought here, just like the other instructors were brought here because of our particular background and expertise. And that's also one of the advantages you get with the National Guard, that we have professions outside of this that help us as instructors, which then subsequently helps you as students. So coming to the WTC or bringing the WTC to you, whether it be for Pathfinder School or Air Assault School or Master Fitness School or a Light Leaders course or Senior Gunners course or any of the courses, you're going to get a professionally run organization. We're just not showing up. We're not just going to hang out for 16 days and have a barbecue and just at the end of those 16 weeks just hand you a torch. You're going to get a full-blown Army course catered to your needs for sure, and that being Pathfinder schools, that's what you need. That's what we're coming there to do. But again, we don't lower the standards because we're National Guard. In fact, some of the active duty folks that have come through feel like we might have even raised the standards in some respects because, again, we are professional instructors. This is it. This is what we do. We don't have a side hustle. We're not driving for a ride share. We're not delivering pizzas. We are professional Army instructors that, again, volunteer to come here. We are vetted. We go through the hiring process, and we put on a truly professional course in whatever aspect that is, whatever you need. And then in answer to your question about what the course is like, so over those 16 days, and I want to say that if you want to come to Pathfinder School, read the welcome letter because every answer is in there for sure. Yep. But so it's broken down into 3 phases. The first phase being sling loads. Then the next phase being HLZs, which again, Sergeant Ludecke said I'm the HLZ phase chief, so I have a real passion for that. This is my background. I spent time at Fort Campbell as a member of the 101st Airborne Division Air Assault. Oh, wow. So that's my heart. That's as much as I've jumped out of planes for a long time, and I absolutely love jumping out of planes. But again, I think my loyalty lies to the 101st Airborne Division. So that's the second phase is HLZs, and then you go into the drop zones phase. Each phase has a written test that you're evaluated on, which you must score 70% or above. And in particular, the sling loads phase has a hands-on test where you test it on 4 loads, which you must score 70% or above on each one of those loads. And also in the drop zone test is broken down into 6 sections, which you must pass every section. It's not cumulative. So in the unfortunate event that you have some difficulty with that section and you don't score 7% or above, you would have to retest that section up to all 6 sections. The course is challenging for sure. And 16 days goes fast. It goes fast, not only for the students, but for us as instructors. But
what does a typical day look like from the student's perspective?
So from the student's perspective, usually starts at 08. Of course, we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to eat, and we encourage, and we say this repeatedly, and I learned this as a student, and I learned it when I was coming through as a trainee instructor, and Sergeant Ludecke harped on it a lot. Got to get sleep. So it really starts the night before. You got to get as much sleep as you possibly can. Sometimes it's easier said than done. But it's about 08. We'll start with the classes. During sling loads phase, you're going to spend a lot of time outside, actually with your hands on the load. You got to touch it, you got to feel it, you got to see it, you got to be able to name it. And then when you move on to the HLZ phase, we do manage to get outside because it's about setting up HLZs. And that's all the classroom that we do builds up to supporting establishing an HLZ. So you do spend some time outside, but unfortunately there's a lot of material that we need to get across. We need to put out to the students. So there are some slides, which again, it's just the nature of it. And then the drop zones, there's a lot of PowerPoint slides as well. And I know everybody talks about the infamous death by PowerPoint. Sometimes that's just the most effective way to get the information out. Of course, there there are countless TMs and FMs and student study guides that are there to support it as well. But there is some classroom portion for sure. Take a break for lunch every day. Again, because we talk about the holistic need as a soldier. You need to find time to rest. You need to find time to recover. So we do break for lunch. Sometimes that break is not just for the students. Sometimes that break is for us as an instructor.
So we don't just go straight through the day.
No,
then,
we absolutely don't. And when I was coming through as a training to be an instructor, and Sergeant Ludecke would say, you know, you got to take that break for you as an instructor as well, and we love answering questions. I don't want you to think we don't want to answer questions, but like I said, that break for lunch is sometimes for us as well. And then after lunch, we'll come back, and there'll be more classes, whether it be an actual practical exercise that we'll go and do outside, and there's practical exercises in every phase, in particular in the drop zone phase, where you actually learn how to set up and walk through setting up the different types of drop zones, because it's one thing to hear it, but then when you actually get to see it, is something entirely different.
I can imagine. So what does it look like then or I guess, let me rephrase that. You know, if I'm a prospective soldier, you know, looking to go to Pathfinder school for whatever reason, what are some of those minimum requirements to get in access to the course?
I'll hit on that, sir. There's a various array of prerequisites to get in the course. I advise everybody to go to their school's NCO and go to ATARS to get the detailed list. But a basic minimum, you have to have a basic GT score of 110 for enlisted. Obviously, officers would have that to be an officer. And then the MOSs range from 11 series to 19 series, some 15 series, some 92 series. Again, go to ATARS for that detailed list. Enlisted is E3 to E7.
Okay.
Officer is 01 to 03. In various branches, well, not various, but limited branches. And then obviously green on all your medical readiness.
Yeah. So pretty straightforward then. You mentioned all I have to do is do a couple practical exercises and get a 70% on each test. How hard can it be? What's your attrition rate look like?
I would say we're about 40%, so about a 60% graduation, somewhere between 50 and 60. Some classes are better than others for various reasons. The instructors, we don't change. We present the material in the way that is practices, you know, TTPs that we have learned. And we do a constant evaluation of ourselves. Sergeant Ludecke looks to see how we're doing. Sometimes he's in more of the classes than the students are, it seems like. So we put the information out as best as we can, and then from there it's just kind of up to the students. Like I said, some are better than others, but yeah, I'd say about between 50 and 60%.
Yeah, it fluctuates a lot, and there's a lot of variables and outliers that go into that.
Okay.
40 to 60 is easy, and I know that's a huge window, but one thing for everybody that wants the golden egg on how to do this, sleep, and then ask questions, no matter how stupid you think they are. The classes that don't ask questions usually have a lower success rate. But we go and do our mobile training team. We're not just on Fort Benning, we go all over the country. We're going overseas this year, potentially. So everything changes, the dynamic changes, the type of units we're changing, the type of equipment we're training on changes. So that really fluctuates the pass rate. But again, the success is sleep and then ask questions. That's usually the general rule.
So it sounds like it's a pretty mentally challenging course. You know, I guess, what are some of your pieces of advice for students going into it? You just said, you know, hit on the sleep part of it, but is there any type of material that students should be prepped ahead of time to help them be more successful in some of those early exams?
Well, really, the first exam is on day one. So,
nice. Okay,
yeah, and that's probably the biggest surprise, the number of students that show up, and so you get a block of instruction in the morning, and then that first test in the afternoon, and that's probably the biggest surprise. So it comes with a welcome letter. Again, Sergeant Ludecke sends it out well in advance, 30, 60 days in advance. You get multiple bites of the apple on that. Read it, because with it comes the nomenclature study packet for sling loads, because that's the very first test that you take. So we do not encourage anybody to go beyond that, because while that material is out there and available to you, trust us, and we will teach you the way to learn it and know it. We don't teach for the test. Again, because we're not just here to hand out badges. We're here to give you a skill and then make you a force multiplier, make you to increase your lethality, and then go out to the force and spread that. So you're not going to get it for free, but don't read too far ahead, because we don't want you to learn something and confuse yourself. So just study that nomenclature packet that comes with the welcome letter, and study it and know it. And the biggest question that we get is, do I need to know all of it? You need to know all of it. Verbatim, down to the last digit of the last number. Every bit of it is testable. So that's really, that's the only thing that you need to study, the only thing you should want to study. That should be your, your go-home criteria at the end of the day. Sleep with it, absorb it through osmosis, whatever it is, but you gotta get it all.
And can you explain a little bit as an instructor, like why is it so important to know like that nomenclature, verbatim?
Well, when you get out into the force and you've got the Pathfinder badge on your uniform, people are going to expect you to be the subject matter expert. And I know it's a cliche phrase, but it really is. Wearing the Pathfinder badge, it's not just something. It's just not just something to do. It is recognition of your work that you put in, but also the work that you're capable of. And Pathfinder School is not a true leadership school. It's not an NCOES, but when you leave here as a current and qualified Pathfinder, you are expected to have a certain skill set that you will implement as a leader and for your leadership. So you should know it, and you should know it verbatim. So that way, if you are asked a question, you can answer that question, or at the very least, you know where to reference it. And particularly for the nomenclature, and we talk about tensile strength, and we talk about rated capacity and things like that, because those could be the difference between life or death, quite frankly, and they don't want to overstate it, and certainly don't want to understate it either. But that could result in loss of life or equipment if you miscalculate something, if you overload something, and in cases sometimes if you even underload something, because their minimum weight requirements just as are their maximum weight requirements. So it's just, can you know it all? No, you probably can't know it all. But again, so you know where to reference it, and that's where the leadership aspect comes into it. And that's, again, you want to know it. Certainly, there's a written evaluation, and we can't hide that from you. But we don't teach the test. We teach you to take this knowledge and to go out and increase the lethality of the force and be a true force multiplier for you and for your chain of command.
And then, what would you say as a NCOIC here is the biggest attrition part of the course right now, where you see the most students drop out?
Well, that's debatable, and these guys will fight in the team room about that. To be honest with you, those outliers, those variables that go from course to course, and just the student body, there's usually strong personalities that will draw the students to ask questions. They see this strong NCO asking questions he's not afraid to. That usually will bleed over into the other students. So there's all those things. That being said, to answer your question, it's usually one of the three phases. I know that's not the greatest answer, but usually one is the big numbers dropper. The big catastrophic go home one. Generally, it's between sling loads, which is the first phase, of course. So it's just smacks them in the face. They realize that we're not bluffing when we say verbatim. HLZs, it varies time to time, but Sergeant Morales does a pretty good job. Just so everyone knows, he is the instructor of the cycle in our last course. He has broken the 3-year streak of drop zones. So an HLZ guy finally broke through and won it.
Wow.
And then getting back on topic, drop zones is just difficult in and of itself. It's the longest phase. It's arguably the most technical phase. You have to memorize the most information. So that one has a higher attrition rate. Generally, it evens itself out, so we're still between that 40 and 60% pass rate. So usually, like I said, it's one phase or the other.
Yeah, I remember thinking that when I was at Pathfinder School that sling loads was a lot of information. Then I got to HLZs, and I was like, oh, this is definitely more challenging. And then I got to drop zones, I was like, oh, this is even more information.
And that's every student that ever goes through.
I'm pretty sure I went to every test thinking, the morning of, that, I could definitely fail this test today. Straight through, though. Didn't have to retest, so there we go.
That's rare. That is rare.
It's a good OER bull.
Yeah. So looking at it, we talked a little bit about capabilities, right, and what Pathfinders bring to the force. We talked about, why it's challenging. You gave the advice on, hey, make sure, like, learn the nomenclature ahead of time, but let us teach you the material. Is there any, I guess you would say, like, tips or tricks that you've noticed for students while they're in the course that help set them up for success, whether it be like study habits, or I know you mentioned the questions a lot, but is there anything additional that you guys kind of throw out there as instructors that you've seen like really do well for most students?
I can't overemphasize the need for rest and recovery.
Okay.
This is a lot of times, and we'll stay late. We will absolutely stay late. The way our schedule is organized, there is the commandant's time, which it's a mandatory study hall. There's can't split any hairs on that. That's what it is, and it's an hour. But we'll stay late. I think the latest I've stayed was about 22:30 before the night of the test. And we stress it as much as we can. Some students heed our advice, some don't. But rest and recovery, because if your mind is not fresh, it doesn't matter how many times I tell you the TDP size for UH-60. If you're half asleep, or you're trying to recharge with multiple energy drinks or multiple cups of coffee, and you might get it for that 15 minutes, but as soon as you start to crash, it's all gone. So sleep, rest, and eat. You definitely, and it seems like, well, this seems like, some hippie stuff about getting sleep and making sure you're eating properly. And I guess maybe it is. I don't know. And
I mean, we've actually done some episodes on like holistic health and fitness.
It is right. It's very important. It's very important, and that's. And you talk about study habits. So somewhere in there, you got to find time to study between trying to eat and trying to eat a good meal, trying to find time to rest. But then you got to study in there too. So whatever study habits got you through to whatever level of education you have, hopefully it's it wasn't just I just showed up and took the test and I was on the football team and coach passed me. Hopefully it's a little bit more than that, but whatever study habits you have, certainly keep those up. A lot of people like to use flashcards. If that works for you, people like to study in groups if that works for you. But again, whatever works for you. Some students, they want to go off and study by themselves. But again, that's all personal technique. But whatever you have done in the past is certainly what you want to. Don't come to Pathfinder school and decide, I've never studied in a group, and I've hated it all my life, but now's the chance for me to start studying in a group, because it's probably not going to work for you. But yeah, like I said, it sounds, kind of simple, just to say, get some sleep, eat well, and study. But outside of just getting the material, that's probably the best thing that you can do.
And you mentioned earlier that there's some like complicated mathematical formulas that go into being a Pathfinder, and you guys teach at the schools. Is there anything that students should prep themselves up ahead of time related to that, or are they gonna?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No.
Don't even.
If you have an understanding of the Pythagorean theorem and trigonometry and things of that nature, like, that's good. That'll help you. But we cater to both. We've got college educated people and we've got people who are knuckle draggers like us, right? So we have similar instructors. A lot of us are from Georgia and have a Georgia education, so we try to cater to the people that need that. We will get you there. If you need to know why, I'll tell you why the Pythagorean theorem is the way it is. If you don't, I'll tell you to turn your brain off and then just plug everything into this formula, and it works out. Don't do anything prior than just learning the nomenclature packet, is my suggestion.
Yeah, I think I can remember when I was through the course, one of the things was like before drop zones, I memorized all these formulas and stuff. I spent like the first 5 minutes of my drop zone test just like charting down all the material so I could just reference it over and over again.
Yep.
Throughout the course, throughout the test anyway. It was I think I must have rewritten that paper during study hall 100 times.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you should.
Absolutely. That is when I went through the course, I'm sure when Sergeant Ludecke went through the course, that's the first thing. As soon as they say go, start writing down every single formula, and probably even some formulas that didn't relate to Pathfinder school. I wrote down everything I could possibly think of. It's like a reference sheet, anything that you can use, like the glossary, terms, anything and everything. Just dumped it all out on the piece of paper.
Now, how was the experience, I guess, for both of you as a student in the course a long time ago?
It was miserable.
Yeah.
It was miserable. I'd like to say that I went to like the last hard one, but that's a lie, because Pathfinder is like the one school in the Army that keeps getting harder, because you need to be trusted to do these complex problem solving and airdrop resupply. So they keep adding stuff. Some would argue badge protecting. I don't believe that's the case. When I went through, I think when Sergeant Morales went through as well, I went back in 2014. There was only 5 sections of the drop zone test. Now there's 6. You have to actually fill out a drop zone survey and do the math that applies to that, and hopefully send off to have an approved drop zone. I've used that in actual applications to go survey drop zones after I've got out of the school several times. A ton of tactical surveys. When we went through, there was no DA form 7382. It's the actual form that you would fill out for a sling load. Like, you should know that. You should know that. You don't get taught that in air assault school. You didn't used to get taught that in Pathfinder. Now you do. So it gets harder, but it's for practical reasons. So when you do leave here and you go to your unit the next day, you may not be extremely confident, but you know immediately exactly what form you got to go to and how to fill it out.
Yeah, and I wish I could say my experience was better or different in any way. Yeah, miserable, stressful, but it is a stressful school. It's not we're not a school of attrition. We're not out here trying to weed people out and, like he said, protect the Pathfinder badge. But it is a difficult school for sure. And there's a lot of material that you have to learn in a short period of time. But every instructor here is dedicated, and we will do everything we can legally and ethically to get you to where you need to be. And then at that point, it's up to you. It's entirely up to you. But I'm glad I went, and also glad I'm done with it. And if honestly, if they told me I had to go again to keep my badge, I'd go again, but it would be I'd do it grudgingly, to say the least. So.
Yeah, I can imagine I mean, I feel like the practical applications are pretty significant, especially for some of these airborne units in the Guard that, I know specifically, like for my unit, like we have a drop zone that we use there all the time, but we're constantly looking at like other opportunities to try to drop soldiers or equipment in different places, just to provide some, different training environments, right? Which is right in line with what you were saying, the practical application piece of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a chance to participate through the National Guard. The National Guard does so much that people don't realize, but through the National Guard, had a chance to participate through my previous unit in Texas, 1st Battalion 143 Airborne.
Oh, nice.
And we participated in Sabre Shield and Sabre Guardian in Europe as part of a NATO operation. And so we jumped in Poland, we jumped in Romania, and a Pathfinder, had to go and do a drop zone survey, because that farm field that we jumped into in Romania, that farm field that we jumped into in Poland, somebody had to go out and certify it as a drop zone, and it was a U.S. Army Pathfinder had to go out and do it. And we're talking about big airborne assaults that a Pathfinder, a graduate, whether it be of the WTC Pathfinder School or a Pathfinder School from the 507th a few years ago, somebody went out and a Pathfinder is responsible for 500-600 shoots in the sky. And that's an awesome responsibility. And that's why we take our job so seriously, because you might be called on as a Pathfinder to go to Romania, to go to Poland, to go to the Ukraine, to go to Latvia, and you have to set up and establish a drop zone. And it's entirely on you and the team that you bring with you. Lives are on the line. Lives are definitely on the line. So that's why we give everything that we possibly can as instructors, because 2 years, 3 years, 7 years down the road, you're going to have to call on something that you learned at the Pathfinder School, and it could cost somebody's life, and it could, or loss of equipment. And I don't know, losing equipment in the Army is pretty serious.
It's super true though, because like I remember, I went to NTC this summer with my brigade, and sure enough, like we were a couple days into operation and out with the Cav Squadron, and they were like, hey, we need to do some air resupply stuff. You're a Pathfinder, why don't you plan this?
Right.
And I was like, oh, let me get those manuals back out again to refresh here.
Absolutely.
But Yeah, super. I mean, I feel like super diverse skill set. Now, and I guess as we close up here, a couple questions. One, you mentioned earlier about like WTC and the Pathfinder team here specifically being able to help provide some aid to the units and stuff out there outside of just teaching the course. Can you dive into that a little bit?
I think both of us should speak on that one. Yeah, we want everyone to know that we are here. We're not only here to teach Pathfinder and continue that skill set with, yes, you'll still have the ASI, and yes, you'll still get the badge for now, and we don't want people to solely come there for that. It was the opinion of somebody at the last Static Line Symposium that what they found Pathfinder School offered you was just to teach you how to sew a badge on your uniform. Just for complete transparency and to deconflict that, we've taken the sewing kits off of our packing list because that's not what we do here. We actually teach this skill set. So in addition to the POI and the course, we offer the air crews here on Fort Benning or elsewhere, any guard units, any active units that need to certify or want a refresher, as long as we can coordinate it through our chain of command, and we've got time in between courses, we're here to help you, to extend, to refresh you on Pathfinder skills and sets. And that's what we're all about. We're all about reps and sets on Pathfinder applications. So if we can be of service, then that's what we want to do, and we want to help the force. Again, we're here. We're available to help in any way. And I'll pass it over to Sergeant Morales to.
Since Pathfinders in the National Guard, they're in a unique situation. The active duty side of the house, they focus again on airborne assaults, which again it's an awesome thing when you're up in the air and you look around and there's 500 of your fellow jumpers around. It's great. There's no feeling like it in the world. In the National Guard, not only do you get that, but you also have your service to your community as well. I guess it was about 2 months ago, we had a recent Pathfinder School graduate call back to us because they needed to move a water purifier or something when they had a couple hurricanes back to back. And so they needed to move this huge piece of equipment. And there was a Pathfinder there who graduated, called back, and we provided him every bit of information. We hit every manual we could think of. We called on called favors, called in other resources, because that's what we're here to do. We give you a skill set, then you go out and then you put that into practice, because we increase the lethality, but we also have to, increase how we serve our community, because again, that's the unique aspect of the National Guard, is we wear two hats. Not only do we defend the nation, but we're also there to support the force, to support the local community as well. So, call back and that's something that is important, I think, for the units that are out there that are not on jump status, and they're thinking, well, why would I need to send anybody to Pathfinder? Why should I pay to bring the WTC here to do a mobile training Pathfinder course? Because we provide you with a skill set. I was talking to somebody else, and I was saying that, it's like going to Starbucks or just ordering just the mocha frappuccino and not knowing about the secret menu that you can offer. So that's why you come to Pathfinder School, and then we're going to give you all the additional skills, the additional knowledge that you can take back to any unit. It doesn't matter if you are in an ABCT in Texas, or if you're in a light infantry unit in Maryland, or wherever it might be. You can take these skills back to your, because as Sergeant Ludecke was talking about, aerial resupply, that's what it is. Sometimes that aerial resupply is personnel, sometimes it's equipment. So the National Guard, again, can use Pathfinders in a way that the active duty wouldn't have an opportunity or a need to use them, because they are solely focused on fighting and winning the nation's wars. But in the National Guard, we fight and win the nation's wars, but then we also service our community as well in times of need or natural disasters.
But yeah, and I mean, last year in 2020 was a great year, or 2021 even.
I wouldn't say it was a great year, sir.
For Guard, example, I guess,
yes,
I should say,
yes.
of Guard being used all over for
right.
from hurricanes to civil support. So, but anyway, well, thank you both for coming on, sharing all the ins and outs of Pathfinder School.
Thanks for having us, sir.
Yes, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in today to Leaders Recon. If you liked today's episode, you can find more information on our social media pages in the links below, or visit our website at www.nationalguard.mil/leaderdevelopment. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.